how you find and attract the right people. If there's good people around, it can feel wonderful. If it's the opposite, it can be really, really painful for everyone.
Would you say the business values are the same as yours, or would you say they're different to yours?
I have once in my life, it was a few years ago, suddenly felt out of place in my business and then was like, oh, I don't like it here, but I can't quit. And that was a really interesting moment. It has never happened before or since. You have to do the work to know your own values, and there's no compromising on that for me. And I'm not excited by going on the journey of scale up with anyone who doesn't share that value. No matter how talented, no matter how skilled, like it just doesn't excite me.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. So we're going to talk about communications, clearly your thing, but you've also alongside that built a very successful business. So as a founder, and you've stepped out and you've stepped back into it, I thought that could be a really interesting thing to explore today around sharing your experience to people listening. Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm up for it.
So we always like to focus on one thing that sort of you would share with other founders. And I suppose what has been your takeaway from the last year or two around the thing that you would share?
So I think the thing that I will share is probably a key part of my journey has been about authenticity. And while that is an absolute crux of the work of the communication training we do, and it features so strongly because it's so important for me and my philosophy of what good communication and true connection can be. I think also for me as a founder, having gone through burnout, which I did, which came to a head last year, authenticity in various different sort of nuanced ways is probably like a key anchoring point that I would... that I could talk about as a potentially really useful idea for people.
Okay, so you said authenticity as a founder has different facets. What are the different facets for you?
I think that one is about how you find and attract the right people. So that's so crucial in anyone who has a business or even working in a business. You know that if there's good people around, both in terms of their talent and skill, but also a shared value system, it can feel wonderful. Whereas if it's the opposite, it can be really, really painful for everyone. And so for me, the process of being authentic and finding the right people to come on to, to be part of the team is really important. And actually, I guess surprising for me, having been in a stage of burnout and basically being quite open with people saying, look, I've got something really amazing, but I'm going to need the right team to really fulfill on that potential. Daring to be authentic meant that I was really attracting the right people. And I found that the process of that, and for us, one of our, sort of golden thread running through all of the communication tools we do is about values. And I think a lot about values and I speak a lot about values, but this idea of knowing your own values and then looking for synergy with people you hire is so crucial. It's probably the biggest tip. And you have to do the work to know your own values. Like for me, one of my values is adventure. Now, not everybody I hire has to share that full sense of adventure, but if people want to feel if someone else's value is, let's say, stability, structure, knowing exactly where they stand, chances are me as the founder, I'm not creating that environment because it doesn't excite me. So that's a good thing to know. And if I bring someone in and they share that adventure value, that's a really good start. Another of my values is kindness and service. I guess that's probably the biggest one that I really massively am driven to make a positive impact on the world. And there's no compromising on that for me. And I'm not excited by going on the journey of scale up with anyone who doesn't share that value. No matter how talented, no matter how skilled, it just doesn't excite me. And so I think the authenticity of me going on my sort of journey to realize that is so important, and then owning that in those conversations. It's almost like it's sort of a flag, where you're waving to the right person and they go, oh, I've got a similar flag. And you can cut through a lot of the rubbish really quickly to be like, okay, we're talking the same language. That's one of the ways authenticity is powerful.
So if we stay on this one for a moment, this idea of like values matching, a lot of time business talk about sort of the business values. You just talked about your own values as the founder. I'm curious, would you say the business values are the same as yours, or would you say they're different to yours?
Yeah, they are different but similar, and obviously they've kind of run through me, so they're going to be aligned. Our business values are empowerment, authenticity, and kindness. And obviously I've just talked about authenticity and kindness. For me, my personal values, growth, adventure, and connection. So growth and adventure will speak to what excites me in a business context and outside of it. I am aware that the people who come in have to be okay with my values because I'm the founder, and that's kind of, to some extent, and you have to keep that healthy and boundary, but the DNA of the business. So, growth and adventure is going to be in there, and therefore you have to make sure that people are up for that, even if it's not an entirely shared value. But I think in terms of the business values, those should be congruent with with your senior leadership team. If they're not, there's a problem, and no one's going to be happy working in a company which is sort of in disconnect with their own values.
But I see it with clients as over time, founders' values can diverge from company values when they step out of the business or become on the business, and the business heads in a certain direction. And there's this moment you go, actually, well, I believe in this, and I want to achieve this in a certain way. And suddenly, as the path the business is on, maybe it's heading the same direction, doing it in a different way, but sometimes it's heading in a different direction with different values. Is that something that you would recognise?
That's not happened to me, and it wouldn't happen. I have once in my life, it was a few years ago, suddenly felt out of place in my business and then was like, oh, I don't like it here, but I can't quit. And that was a really interesting moment. It has never happened before or since. But I think it's really important to be able to check in and make sure that there's alignment. For me, in my philosophy, I'm not... I would never sacrifice kind of my values and my contentment and fulfillment, and being aligned with your values is high up in terms of being able to be fulfilled. I would never sacrifice that for, money coming in, unless obviously it was to keep my family safe and alive and, in food. But, sort of essentials taken care of, that's just not something I would do. And I would advise people who were asking me if they were working in a company which was now sort of misaligned, I would say if you can't find that alignment, then it's not going to be healthy for you.
How did you get clarity on your values then? So to know which flag to wave and to know what flag to look for, you need to be clear on what your values are. How was that an easy process for you? Did you always know?
Well, because I trained as a coach, there's various exercises you do through that. So I started doing those exercises. I probably do it every year or two. And I think it's a really important thing to do, but you actually have to work at it. And I've found when I've done it with friends, I'll say, do you know your values? And they go, yeah, of course I know my values. And kind of go, what are they? And then they hum and ha and think about it and don't really know. And then I do the exercises with them and they come out the other side and it's like, oh, wow, now I know myself better. And often then I'll take it to, are your values met at work? And there's this kind of eureka moment of, that's why I'm not happy, because my values are different from my company's values. So I would absolutely advise people to do that work. It takes maybe 45 minutes. It's not a big time investment. There's loads of exercises online as well.
Okay, so we've got this values alignment as one sort of facet of authenticity. So you've waved your flag. You're talking about it in interview process. So being very clear what yours are, both as a founder of the business, making sure there's a match. What's another facet of that authenticity?
A big one is about being honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, is nuanced. And as from my experience, I had an MD working in a role, and I was concerned about it from the first day. And I talked about it to the people around me, but kept convincing myself that everything was fine, rather than really listening and digging in and sort of doing my due diligence around my gut instinct. And because I didn't do my due diligence around my gut instinct, it ended up costing a huge, relatively speaking, amount of money for the company. A lot of time wasted, a lot of, psychological distress. And so, a big learning afterwards. I was like, right, do your due diligence around your gut. And I think so it's that authenticity piece of making sure that you turn it inwards as well. Like, if you're feeling something is off, then you listen and you dig in and and I think there's something about being businesslike about it, because I did listen, but I kept talking myself around. Whereas actually, if I had said, right, I'll do a due diligence piece on it, let's measure this, let's get very concrete, let's put a timeline to, being, almost objectively sort of structured about it, would have been a much more productive way to be, rather than be like, oh, I don't want I don't want to think this, so I'll just shove it to a corner. So I think, authenticity with yourself is so key. And I think that's also true. I was speaking to some of our coaches the other day, and they were saying that clients had, they had some perimenopausal clients who were struggling because, their memory was different, and their ability to, finish a sentence or a thought was not like it used to be. And I was saying, well, actually, there's an authenticity piece there of going, well, who am I now? Like, I need to do almost the sort of SWOT analysis of my new identity, because it has changed. That's fine. And, there's hormonal changes, and some aspects of that are really positive. Like, there's ways in which, once you look for the positive, actually someone, a lady in perimenopause is more able to empathize and be in the present moment. And maybe less able to continue a thought all the way through without forgetting a word halfway through. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you own the new identity with authenticity and go, okay, this is who I am. And actually my ability is now I've got all, the positive, I've got all this experience, etc. So I think there's, it features really strongly in imposter syndrome as well, of going, right, what is it that I'm pushing to one side and hiding away?
It sounds like, was it that you didn't have the time to explore the gut feeling, or that you didn't want to explore the gut feeling, do you think?
I think you always have time. I was awake in the middle of the night several times. I didn't want to, because I was scared, because I had fear, and I wanted it to work. With this particular person, they were very charismatic, and they became the glue very quickly, and I was worried about the impact of taking the glue out. And so it was sort of fear, which I think, fear will guide so many of our decisions if we're not careful. It was around, I don't think it's usually to do with time. I think it's to do with recognizing the importance of getting forensic about the things that are troubling, bringing them to the surface and almost laying them out, like your finds, like an archaeologist would, and sort of getting the dust and dust them off, and being quite almost scientific about it. It makes me think of a story of mine when during the pandemic, I decided to do an executive leadership course, and I wasn't at all confident about my leadership and my sort of ability to manage. I hadn't really actually had experience except through my own company, and I'd always been ashamed of that. So I tucked it away and, felt bad and tried to do better, and just felt sort of ashamed. And shame is a big, dangerous thing that I think we should be aware of. And through doing this executive leadership course, I brought it out into the light, and I realized the ways in which I was a fantastic leader and the ways in which I wasn't a fantastic leader. And somehow and we had to write essays every week, which I did, but very honest ones. And I realized that actually, once I brought it to the light, there was no shame. I was really strong at this. I was pretty weak at this. Now I needed to put strategies around the areas where I was weak because of, to avoid the fallout of sort of my weak areas. And everything shifted for me from that stage really into going, oh, wow, that is the power of authenticity, where you're not ashamed of yourself. Because actually, I guess the opposite of authenticity is being ashamed, hiding away. And shame is a very, very toxic emotion. And I think one we all know. Authenticity is about saying, okay, this is who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm taking it out of the shadows. And then that enables you to make decisions around the weaker bits. And that's fine, because we all have them. But without the courage to bring it to the light, that's the danger zone when we sort of hide away.
And with this bringing it to light and the knowledge, so it's knowledge, self-knowledge, but is that you sharing that with other people as well, this idea of I'm good at this, I'm not good at this?
So that's a really interesting one. I am. And actually I found that, in fact, I found it really recently that my team absolutely love that. It's very unconventional. And I was talking about it with them just the other day. But a few weeks ago, we're a small team and they love London Speech Workshop. And I interviewed all of them and I recorded it. And I said, can you tell me, what makes it lovely for you? What do you like? And I didn't really know what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect comments on my leadership. And a theme that came up was how, through me being very authentic and saying where I'm strong and where I'm not and what I can do and what I can't do, that made them feel safe to admit what they couldn't do and feel okay and not judged. So because of my ability to say, yeah, I'm great at that, I'm a bit rubbish at that, they felt able to really inhabit a growth mindset stance, which I think is essential really for psychological safety in the workplace and and a forward moving company, but also just to own up and be okay with not being great in everything, and that failure or mistakes are opportunities. And actually I talk a lot about growth mindset with them, but hadn't realized it was through my sort of living and breathing it that became the real role model for them to feel psychologically safe. So, yeah, I think there's a real power to it.
I mean, it seems that the common theme here is a lot of self-knowledge, like having the courage to really look at yourself and go, like, what are my values? Who is my authentic self today rather than maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Like, what am I strong at? What am I weak enough? Moving away from that feeling of being ashamed and just being confident to go, this is who I am. And that's almost like a gift to your team to go, this is who I am, so you be who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of our culture is about outward facing. So what can you achieve? What can you do? How do we measure you? We'll measure you in your GCSE, A-level, university, first job, your scores. And actually, there is so much work that we can do on just that first bit of having the courage to look inwards. And you're stuck with you for life. Like, you might as well be the expert on you because no one else is going to be the expert on you. But also that ability to kind of almost walk hand in hand with all the yous, all the facets of you, and go, okay, I'm here. This is like, I'm my team. I'm my cheerleader. I'm my captain. I think is the way to away from shame and into essentially self-acceptance, which is what we're talking about, right? To be able to be authentic. And I do think that's an ongoing journey. And probably there's quite a few people who that's just much easier for. I'm naturally very sensitive and always have been, which, and a deep thinker. And I think for people who think deeply and are sensitive, there's more, potential for angst. And like the highs can be higher and the lows can be lower, but you have to do more work, I think. And it's not a one and done. But yes, I agree that a lot of this is about taking the time to do that self-awareness piece. And if you don't do it, it's not going to happen for you.
Because quite interesting, I found with on the coaching side, working with founders, there's a sense of people often come for a business reason, and often you end up doing personal work because who you are as a founder and as a leader is who you are as a person. And it sounds like the self-knowledge provides you a nice foundation to be the best version of yourself as a leader, which leads to building a successful company. And so many times the narrative is, I don't have time to work on myself. I should, like, the priority is the business. I need to push that forward. I'll do all that stuff later, not realizing that is the hole in the business is that you're not okay. And actually, once you get in a good place, it allows your team to thrive. It allows your business to thrive. So it's kind of, it can feel quite indulgent, but actually it's almost the biggest gift you can give both yourself, your team, and also the loved ones around you.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think there's something about, I'm really asking the question of sort of what are we here for? If it's just to make money, if that's literally all someone can come up with, then sure, sacrifice yourself and your happiness. And but I think actually most people are making money for a reason, and that will usually be around increasing quality of life or being able to do things that excite them, or it's an enabling tool. And then that piece, as soon as you bring your own contentment and the contentment of the people around or purpose into it, then you have to do the self-work, because if otherwise all you end up with is money and very unhappy. And we know that it's very possible to be very rich and very unhappy. So it's kind of a given that that's not the only thing you should aim for. And once you bring the other stuff in, I think it's really important to take the time to work out what makes you tick. And it doesn't mean that you have to do all of this deep kind of, deep self-work, because I don't think that is for everybody. But when I think about me and my shift from burnout to massive excitement and drive, which has happened over the last 9 months or so, the key thing is having a massive sense of purpose. And that was something I arrived at. Like, it wasn't it's taken years, but really also it's landed with me going, okay, that I know how I need to be and feel in order to motor that purpose. I can't do it from a place of sort of no oxygen. So yeah,
that feels like quite a powerful shift thing. So I'd even say, like, even if your purpose is to make money, if you're in a good place, you've probably got a better chance of of surviving the journey and making it. But for you, this authenticity piece and this unlocking your purpose, for someone listening, and they're, let's say, a scale-up founder as well, they might be in that place of business is doing okay, maybe having those some personal challenges around burnout or something else. How would you suggest people take that first step into their authenticity?
For me, during my burnout, there were many, I wasn't sleeping, as I think is a common theme. And so I would journal a lot in the middle of the night. So my 3 a.m. journaling, trying to get at what I wanted. And I did toy with the idea of, do I want to move to Tuscany and get an old gorgeous farmhouse and, paint it by hand whilst looking at, a vineyard that won't grow because I don't have green fingers. And then I realized what I really wanted. And so I think that process of actually going, well, what do you really want? And being prepared to, really ask yourself and then visualize and meditate on it. And it's a lovely meditation to be like, right, I'm 5 years from now and I've got everything I want. What does that look like? It's a lovely coaching session. It's just a lovely thing to do. And I've often done it by myself with my phone on a voice memo, just walking in the woods. So I think there's something about, for me, doing that specific piece of inquiry to build the vision.
Yeah, what is your purpose? Where do you want to be in 5 years? The future pacing exercise. I agree. Like, it's, you know where you're going. It don't feel like you're going downhill rather than uphill, because you kind of fall towards it.
Yeah, in the flow.
So for people listening, you could do that walking in the woods on a phone. You could But this clarity, you feel again ties back into authenticity, and like if you're clear what your authentic goal is, that's going to unlock quite a lot of the things on the path.
Yeah, I think it's about understanding what happiness looks like for you. And that might be a process of sifting away through dated ideas which don't serve you or don't fit for you. So, if your parents wanted you to be a doctor and you're on this pursuit to be the best doctor or a surgeon, and actually being prepared to go, okay, if I'm going to do the authentic thing, I don't want that. Now, that might take many iterations. For me, back in my 20s, I had gone freelance as a TV drama producer. And I actually, one thing that worked for me then, I was writing an email to my future self. There's something it was called, I don't know if it's still around, futureme.org. And it sends emails to you in the future. And I heard about it on the radio. And I sat down to write an email to my future self. And I'm literally writing to me in 5 years. And I've won my first BAFTA. And I'm casting for my next TV drama. And then as I was writing that, I realized I didn't want to be that person. And so that, I had this very dramatic about turn whilst writing to the me in the future I thought I wanted to be. And I was like, I just don't want to. That person feels way too ego driven. I don't want to be that person. And went on a whole journey, actually half of it in that email of who do I want to be. And I changed tack in that moment quite dramatically. But it helped me get to a deeper sense of, no, I want to serve directly. I want to feel the tangible impact of my help and my wisdom on the people I'm working with. And that shifted me. So I think there's something about being prepared to courageously own what is truly yours and what is not. And that can take, for me in that email, it took half an hour and I was like, wow, everything changed. But it could also be a longer journey. For me, over burnout last summer, it took 3 or 4 weeks. I had another business idea. I was thinking about taking a sabbatical and writing a book or doing a master's. So, it took a good few weeks. And I gave myself that time, actually all of August, before I came back with a concrete decision, which was to, put everything into my current business because I love it. But I gave myself permission to walk away. And I think there's something about having the courage, and courage is obviously a word that keeps popping up, to get rid of the plan and everything you think you should do and everything you think society wants you to do, to work out what your path is. And so being authentic isn't easy, but I think for me it's worth it. It's incredible. So now I everything, it feels amazing. And I do think part of the magic is about a not very magical thing, being more real than you've ever been.
Because I think you can end up feeling a bit trapped by your own expectations, by other people's expectations, historical definitions of success. Like, I've got to do this. Like, if I don't succeed in this business, I'm a failure. And I think taking a step back, looking at the longer term and going, if I want to be here, it doesn't necessarily have to be with this business, it doesn't have to be with this person, it doesn't have to be on this path. It's like, ultimately, what do I want? We can actually actively make a choice and go, that's not who I am, that's not who I want to be, that's not who my true authentic self is.
Yeah, and I think that's where values are really useful, because they can guide you back, because we can get so confused. And I think it's fair, it's okay that we get confused, because it is confusing. But I think if there's values that can be these very powerful anchoring points that can make you go, hang on, is that really what I want? And I think it has to be acknowledged, it's really difficult to move away from what you think you want. And I had a friend who lost their job as a CEO and really struggled. And he thought he wanted another job as a CEO. For me, I was so excited by the rich tapestry that is available to someone who's got all this experience and now can bring in new things. And I was like, you want to definitely start your own business. Like there's so much, and yet there was so much self pressure around what success should be like for him. And I think that there's, for me, the idea of creating a rich tapestry is just such a wonderful thought that it takes away from, I can't quit, or I can't fail, or I can't declare bankruptcy, or I can't, actually it's all part of the rich tapestry. As long as you grow and see it as this sort of wonderful unfolding storyline, then everything can be enriching, everything. And I think that mental shift from disaster to beauty is probably, another really useful tip. It's like, write it as your rich tapestry, right? Every perceived failure as a beautiful kind of color input into your wonderful weaving. And actually it becomes, you can take it anywhere.
So many of our weaknesses lead to our strengths. And you can't have it go, I'm a visionary, therefore I'm not great on detail. You could beat yourself up for not being great in detail, or you can lean into being a visionary. It's kind of like, I'm really good. I need people to energize me. I'm not feel good by myself. It's like, well, you're really good at energizing people. So it's kind of, we can lean towards the dark, but it sounds like really like understanding your authentic self, but really leaning into it has been a game changer for you.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that. It's I think really nice for other people, because in being so authentic, everybody who I speak to, there's room for people to feel potentially very valued and very important in the sort of constellation in my workplace, because I'm not saying, I can do everything. I'm like, I can do a very narrow bit very, very well. And actually, it's a wonderful thing to need other people, and to celebrate collaboration and team. So yeah, I think it's very, in my experience, it's incredibly powerful, and also in the way that it sits within our communication tools. I think it's the best way to foster connections and relationships and environments of sort of mutual respect where people feel valued.
What's the next step for people if they really want to lean into this?
I mean, there's probably 5 that have come to mind. I don't know if I can do one. Can I give you 5?
Go for it.
Approximately. So I would say do the values work. Look up something online. That's really doable. And get to sort of 3 or 4 core values. And then check out the extent to which you're honouring them in your work and in your life. And just note. Another one would be to do a kind of audit. So almost like if you were doing one of the x-rays in the airport, or, those scans, you're almost doing an emotional scan. Like, where do I feel content? Where do I feel fulfilled? Where do I feel off? Where do I feel discord or incongruence? And do a very honest audit, so you can actually look at the areas that are like, yay, and the areas where you're like, oh, and it might be a relationship, it might be a working, partnership, it might be a project, but actually doing that honestly. And then I would also do the kind of 5-year or 3-year visioning, where you take away all the parameters and just go, I'm gorgeously, divinely, blissfully, contentedly happy. What am I doing? What's that look like? And for very few people, it's going to be sitting on the beach with a pina colada, because that is just boring. Like after, 5 days, it was 10 for some, it won't be that. So what are you doing? I think probably those 3, and then middle of the night journaling, obviously. just throw that in. Big fan. No, but I think that a process of giving yourself permission to actually honestly, forensically audit and say, what is me now? What do I want? And having the courage to do that, I think those would be my tips.
Amazing. Well, Emma, thank you so much for sharing your whole journey and this how authenticity, what it means to you, and how to really live it.
My absolute pleasure.